Jagged mountain peaks touch the sky. Serene pastures and farmlands. Clear, sparkling rivers. This is not an ordinary train ride. From May to October each year, Rocky Mountaineer Railtours explores the historic and scenic routes from the Pacific Ocean to the majestic Canadian Rockies. Winding along the tracks of Western Canada's legendary rail lines, it travels through some of the most magnificent scenery in the world. A century ago, there were no trains, cars, or towns in this wilderness area. It was accessible only to mountain goats and intrepid trekkers. Then, one of the most ambitious and challenging construction feats began: a coast-to-coast railway. 5 majestic mountain ranges in Western Canada, including the rugged Canadian Rockies, posed the greatest obstacle. As persistent surveyors sought and found routes through this beautiful but wild land, engineers proved their brilliance by constructing extraordinary trestle bridges and spiral tunnels. And on November 7th, 1885, the national dream of uniting this vast country by rail was realized. The last spike was driven into Canada's first transcontinental railway, connecting east with west. The once impassable Rocky Mountains were now open to everyone. The Canadian Rockies were the place to be, and the railway was the best way to enjoy the adventure. Today, the adventure lives on with Rocky Mountaineer Railtours. Eastbound or westbound is your choice on this 2-day all-daylight rail tour. Westbound tours depart for Vancouver from Jasper, Banff, or Calgary. Eastbound tours travel from Vancouver to Jasper or Banff and on to Calgary. Gateway cities for Rocky Mountaineer Railtours are easily accessible. Air service is available from around the world to Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, and Seattle. Ground transportation connects Banff and Jasper with Calgary, and Edmonton and Vancouver with Seattle. Our eastbound train adventure begins here in Vancouver. This cosmopolitan city is set against a backdrop of mountains and sea. It's no wonder Vancouver is widely known as one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Whatever a visitor could crave, it's here in Vancouver. Recreation, culture, shopping, and beauty. Early morning, Vancouver. Excitement builds as travelers from around the world arrive for the trip of a lifetime. The Rocky Mountaineer rolls out of Vancouver on its 2-day all-daylight journey through more than 600 miles, 1,000 kilometers of incredible scenery. The busy city is left far behind as we travel through the tranquil farmlands of the Fraser River Valley. The land is fertile, rich in river sediment released by the Fraser River over centuries. This area has a colorful past. The Fraser was one of the primary water routes of the early explorers and played a major role during the gold rush era in the 1860s. An hour out of Vancouver, we come to a peaceful spot with a rowdy past. Here in 1904, Billy Miner, the infamous outlaw, robbed his first Canadian train and got away with over $50,000 in gold dust, currency, and bonds. The Benedictine monastery, Westminster Abbey, lies perched high up on the hillside. It's part of Mission City, which was a popular spot for trappers and settlers many years ago. The landscape begins to rise from flat farmlands up to the peaks of the coastal mountain range. In the gold rush era, this area was bustling with gold seekers and fur traders. Today, lumber and tourism are the local industries. As we move further into the Fraser River Canyon, the river changes from placid to turbulent.
On your left-hand side, we're coming up to Hell's Gate, which is the narrowest point of the Fraser Canyon.
Dramatic and spectacular, this narrow gorge lives up to its name of Hell's Gate. When the river is at its highest point, it surges through at a rate of 215 million gallons per minute. Time permitting, passengers may have an opportunity to disembark at some of the stations along the way. This was a lively spot during the gold rush. Hundreds of miners traveled here, many from the city of Boston. They panned for gold on the sandbars of the Fraser River. Consequently, this settlement was named Boston Bar. At Lytton, the clear Thompson and the muddy Fraser join and flow as one to the Pacific Ocean. It's a popular spot for river rafters to gather. The Fraser River was named after Simon Fraser, a Scottish-Canadian explorer. Guided by the area's native people, Fraser discovered this dramatic junction of the two rivers in the early 1800s. He named the Thompson River after David Thompson, a geographer and fellow explorer. Thompson mapped a tremendous portion of British Columbia and Alberta. As we wind along the Thompson River, the banks become steep and narrow. The turbulent waters below make for exhilarating whitewater rafting. These strange rock and clay formations are called hoodoos. Formed at the end of the Ice Age, they are all that remains of former lake beds. There's more than peaks and valleys on this trip. This is the land of sagebrush and tumbleweeds, a desert in the middle of British Columbia. Welcome to cowboy country. The dry, desert-like terrain is home to some of North America's largest cattle ranches. Imagine Imagine the size of the bird that built this nest. The osprey can often be seen soaring high above the river on the lookout for fish, its favorite prey. Here in historic Kamloops, the Rocky Mountaineer pauses overnight. In a comfortable hotel, passengers get a good night's rest without missing a minute of the exciting scenery. Kamloops is the gateway city to the interior of British Columbia. On day 2 of our eastbound trip, the Rocky Mountaineer separates into 2 trains. From Kamloops, one train heads northeast to the mountain resort of Jasper. The other train runs east to beautiful Banff and onward to Calgary. We'll follow the Banff-Calgary line. After leaving the arid landscape around Kamloops, the train now passes into lake country.
On your left-hand side.
This is a favorite vacation destination for visitors every summer who come to explore over 600 kilometers of shoreline. One of the most popular ways is by houseboat. Craigellachie marks a milestone in Canadian history. The last spike of the Canadian Pacific Railroad line was driven in here on November 7th, 1885, linking Canada by rail. On our way to the Canadian Rockies, we passed through 4 different mountain ranges: the Monachees, Caribous, Selkirks, and Purcells. In winter, heavy snows tumble down from the mountainsides into the valleys. This section of the rail line is characterized by snow sheds, bridges, and tunnels that burrow right through the mountains. A dispute between a geologist and his pack horse gave this river its name. In 1858, James Hector was surveying this canyon when he was kicked in the chest by his horse. Hector recovered and continued his expedition along what was later named the Kicking Horse River. The Rocky Mountain Range towers above the train, colossal and magnificent. These beautiful mountains are commonly referred to as the Canadian Rockies. Millions of years ago, the land was thrust skyward by the Earth's shifting plates, forming many of North America's tallest mountains. The lakes in this region are equally striking. Years of deposited silt from glaciers have colored the lakes a dazzling turquoise. Elk meandering through the woods. Mountain goats perched high on rock ledges. Bears ambling through a field. Mountain sheep grazing along the slopes. Wildlife is abundant. Passengers often see some of the 50 different mammals and over 200 species of birds that make this region their home. Once, this stretch of track was steep and treacherous. In 1907, construction began on the spiral tunnels. Crews burrowed in a figure-8 through Mount Ogden and Cathedral Mountain, allowing trains to climb the Big Hill on their way to the Alberta Rockies. At just over 1 mile above sea level, the train crosses the boundary between the provinces of British Columbia and Alberta. This picture-perfect lake was originally named Lagan, after a Scottish village. In 1884, it was renamed Lake Louise, in honor of Queen Victoria's daughter. One of the most distinctive peaks in the Alberta Rockies is Castle Mountain. Remember the explorer James Hector and his kicking horse? Hector named this mountain for its obvious resemblance to a castle. Towards the end of day 2, Rocky Mountaineer Railtours arrives in the picturesque resort of Banff, in the heart of the Canadian Rockies. Passengers may continue on the train to Calgary or depart here in Banff. Banff is located in the middle of Banff National Park, Canada's oldest national park. Its natural beauty has been charming visitors for over a century. It's a recreational paradise, attracting hikers, photographers, naturalists, and artists. Everywhere you turn, the scenery is breathtaking. Onward to Calgary and some cowboy boot-stomping fun. Settled on the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, Calgary is a booming oil and cattle town. It's also home to the world-famous Calgary Stampede, held every July. For many Rocky Mountaineer passengers, the train adventure doesn't end in Banff or Calgary. There is the option of a round-trip adventure. A tour bus takes passengers from Banff to Jasper. There, the Rocky Mountaineer departs on its 2-day trip to Vancouver. Passengers opting for a round trip can travel in the opposite direction as well. The drive along the Icefields Parkway between Banff and Jasper is awe-inspiring. A chain of massive ice fields run alongside the parkway. These ancient remnants of the Ice Age are up to 1,000 feet thick. Many visitors take a closer look on a tour here at the Athabasca Glacier. Once it was a fur trading depot, then a railway settlement. Now, a renowned tourist attraction. Jasper is a charming village located in Canada's largest national park. Known as the Jewel of the Rockies, Jasper is a popular spot for hiking, fishing, biking, and sightseeing. Here in Jasper, we'll board the Rocky Mountaineer westbound for Vancouver. Crystal lakes and waterways abound on this beautiful trip. This lake is a popular hangout for local moose. Moose Lake is also known for its abundance of rainbow trout. Yellowhead. We pass a river, lake, and mountain pass that bear this odd name. In the early 1800s, an Iroquois Indian with a blonde tint in his hair crossed the mountain pass. His nickname was Tête Jaune in French, or Yellowhead in English.
Mount Robson is just coming up here on the left-hand side.
The Stoney Indian tribe first set eyes on this wondrous sight and called it the Mountain of the Spiral Road. Mount Robson, the most magnificent mountain on this journey. At 12,972 feet, it is the highest peak in the Canadian Rockies. The enormous glaciers covering its slopes run off into Berg Lake on the north and Kinney Lake on the south. The scenery never ends. Our Rocky Mountaineer Railtours trip takes us by placid wetlands, expansive glaciers, and cascading waterfalls. In the distance, the Premier and Monashee mountain ranges march along the horizon. We descend from mountain country to the rolling plateaus of the North Thompson River. Next stop, Kamloops, and an overnight stay in a hotel before heading through the Fraser Valley to beautiful Vancouver the next day.
The scenery is just awesome. We're just taken by the splendor of the mountains.
Oh, I definitely recommend it. I think it's something that everybody should have an opportunity to try at least once.
I guess awesome is the word.
I would rate this trip on a scale of 1 to 10, 11.
The adventure draws to a close. The Rocky Mountaineer waits patiently at the station for its next journey to begin. We are left with many happy memories of the most spectacular train trip in the world.